My parents degraded me at my sister's graduation. They mocked me as if I were an accident, comparing me to my flawless sister. But I left them speechless with what I did that day. At my sister Elena's graduation, I was utterly mortified by my own parents. In front of family, friends, and even acquaintances, they belittled me without a second thought. This occasion was meant to be about Elena, my older sister, who had just earned her degree and secured a prestigious job. When my parents stood to deliver a speech in her honor, I expected them to say something respectful and appropriate. She had worked tirelessly to reach this milestone, and she deserved every bit of praise. I wasn't surprised when they described Elena as one of life's greatest gifts. By then, I was fully aware of their favoritism. They had always cherished her more, constantly measuring me against her brilliance. Then, their speech took a cruel turn. They joked that they should have stopped having children after Elena. They claimed that second-born children were usually a disappointment. My parents even suggested that if they had only had Elena, they could have devoted more energy and resources to her instead of wasting them on me. Hearing them say these things, so openly, so carelessly, while I sat right there, was like a slap in the face. I scanned the room, hoping someone, anyone, would be disturbed by their remarks. But all I saw were smiling faces, relatives laughing along, as if this humiliation was just casual entertainment. Though my parents had always made me feel lesser, this was the first time they had done so publicly. There was no way to deny it anymore. In their eyes, I would never measure up to their beloved, exceptional daughter, Elena. This wasn't just a one-time lapse in judgment. It confirmed what I had long suspected. To them, I was merely an afterthought, while Elena was the daughter they cherished beyond all else. Growing up as the second child, I had become accustomed to my parents' silent favoritism. It seeped into everything: how they spoke, how they acted, how they prioritized their time. They often forgot my birthday. More than once, they were away on business trips, leaving me alone. But when it came to Elena, they never missed a single celebration. Every year, they went all out: lavish parties, heartfelt gestures, ensuring she felt loved and honored. Watching them pour their affection onto her made me lower my expectations. I learned early on that my birthday simply didn't matter to them. As a strong-willed child, I was often labeled as disruptive or difficult. My parents constantly reminded me that my personality was problematic: too opinionated, too talkative, too outspoken. Meanwhile, Elena's quiet, reserved nature was praised. She was the ideal daughter, the poised, graceful one who never stirred trouble. Naturally, she was the one they showcased, the one they bragged about. No matter what I did, I could never escape their criticism. For years, I tried to mold myself into what they wanted. I studied harder, behaved better, followed their expectations, hoping that one day they would finally see me differently. But as I grew older, I realized that no matter how much I tried, I would never be Elena. I wasn't her. I couldn't be. Eventually, I gave up. I stopped trying to win their approval and just accepted my role in the family. Still, it hurt, watching them boast about Elena's successes to anyone who would listen, while dismissing anything I had ever achieved. At least, all of this had stayed within the walls of our home. But at that graduation, they exposed it for everyone to see. I was stunned by how effortlessly they ridiculed me in front of our extended family. Until then, they had never humiliated me so openly. But what shattered me even more was the reaction, or rather the lack of one. No one stepped in. No one called them out. No one even offered me a sympathetic glance. Instead, my parents continued to glorify Elena. Their voices brimmed with pride, a tone I had never heard directed at me. Then, with beaming smiles, they announced her graduation gift: a brand new car, the one she had always dreamed of owning. Applause erupted. Elena embraced them with love and gratitude. The room was filled with joy. And I felt like a stranger in my own family. The strange thing is, I had never been jealous of Elena. We had always gotten along well enough, and I genuinely believed she deserved everything good that came her way. But that speech broke me. For years, I had silently endured their favoritism, their cruel words, their indifference. I had swallowed it all, convincing myself that if I stayed strong and patient, things would change. But that night, as their speech echoed in my ears, I realized I had reached my limit. I was done pretending it didn't hurt. So for the first time, I confronted them. I mustered the courage to tell them how deeply they had wounded me, hoping, just hoping, they would finally see the pain they had caused. That they would, at the very least, acknowledge it. Maybe even feel ashamed. But instead of remorse, I was met with cold indifference. They dismissed my words as an overreaction, as if years of neglect and belittlement were something trivial, something I had no right to be upset about. My father even went as far as to say that he had nothing to be proud of when it came to me. That was the moment I knew I would never mean anything to them. They treated it as though it was my fault if they were let down by who I had become. I remember how effortlessly he said it, as if my existence was of no significance to him. My mother, on the other hand, urged me to stop overreacting, insisting that I was being overly sensitive for getting upset over something so trivial. It felt as if my parents were implying that I hadn't earned the fundamental respect of being their child simply because I hadn't done enough, as if I was somehow less worthy of their pride or affection than Elena, solely because I wasn't her. The issue even made its way back to Elena, who defended my parents and, unsurprisingly, insisted that I should be more forgiving toward them. She said something that truly struck a chord with me, something I'll never forget. She told me I had no reason to be so offended by their graduation speech because it was just an innocent gesture. Elena reassured me that if I had studied and worked as diligently as she did, I too could have made them proud. Of all the words spoken, those were the ones that cut the deepest. It was gut-wrenching to realize that, in their eyes, I hadn't worked hard enough to deserve their respect. She made it seem so simple, as though the years of effort I had poured into my studies were invisible to her. As if my struggles, my endless attempts to find a job, meant absolutely nothing. As my older sister, I had expected her to stand by me in some way, but she didn't. That, more than anything, felt like a betrayal. Looking back, that conversation changed everything. That was the moment I understood. I was done chasing my family's approval, done explaining myself to them, done hoping for something that would never come, love or validation. From that day forward, I devoted myself entirely to building something of my own. I threw myself into my studies, focusing on what I could control, shaping my own destiny. 2 years later, my perseverance paid off. I was awarded a full scholarship to my dream university. It was a personal victory, one that belonged solely to me. It was the outcome of my dedication, resilience, and unwavering refusal to let my family's neglect define me. For the first time, I had achieved something entirely on my own. When I broke the news to my parents, their reaction was one of disbelief, as if they had never imagined I was capable of going to college, let alone earning a scholarship. Elena even examined my acceptance letter twice, as though she couldn't believe I had accomplished something without their help. Clearly, they had all underestimated me. And watching their stunned expressions, that, I must admit, was deeply satisfying. I simply shook my head at her disbelief, but my mother's next words soured my mood. She remarked that it was fortunate I had secured a full scholarship because they hadn't set aside any college funds for me anyway. Yet, they had no problem covering Elena's tuition. Their lack of preparation for my future didn't seem to bother them in the slightest. When the time came to move out, I packed my things in silence and left for my college apartment. That day, I made an unwavering decision. I was severing all ties with my parents and Elena. I felt no obligation to explain myself. Time and time again, they had proven that my emotions, my voice, my very existence held little significance to them. So why should I waste my breath justifying my choice? They had never once offered an apology that could mend the years of neglect and heartache they had inflicted upon me. Over the following weeks and months, my family bombarded me with emails and messages, desperately hoping I would reconsider. At first, I felt tempted to open them, but each message was a bitter reminder of who they were. Their words were laced with manipulation, attempting to twist reality and paint me as the irrational one. Instead of owning up to the years of emotional damage they had caused, they chose to dismiss my decision as impulsive and immature. They clung to one central belief: I was the one destroying the family. So in their eyes, I was the one in the wrong. I never responded. Since starting college, my life has taken a turn for the better. I've poured my energy into my studies, hobbies, and most importantly, relationships with people who see me for who I truly am. Working part-time at a nearby diner has helped me save for the future. Meeting new people and listening to their stories has been unexpectedly fulfilling. Cutting off my family has allowed me to fully immerse myself in this new chapter of my life. I've kept myself busy, filling my days with meaningful experiences. And to my surprise, I haven't once missed them. I haven't even wondered how they're doing. Until yesterday. An unexpected email from my parents appeared in my inbox. I was stunned. They had stopped reaching out long ago, seemingly accepting my silence. And yet, here it was. A message urging me to contact them immediately because they had bad news to share. Despite everything, I felt my chest tighten. Years of pain and rejection couldn't erase the lingering fear that something terrible had happened. My heart pounded in my chest, my thoughts racing through worst-case scenarios. Had someone fallen gravely ill? Or worse, had someone died? Even after all this time, even after everything they had put me through, fear crept in, relentless and consuming. I steadied myself for whatever news they were about to deliver. I grabbed my phone, unblocked them, and called back immediately. Elena, who was enduring a difficult personal crisis, was deeply unsettled by the revelation my parents wanted to share. They disclosed that she had been battling substance abuse, which had drastically derailed her life. Her addiction had escalated to the point where she had lost her job, depleted her savings, and was now left with no resources or way forward. I had no clue that Elena was struggling with anything of this magnitude, so the news blindsided me. She had always been my dependable, high-achieving sibling, yet here she was, caught in the grips of addiction. My parents were so stunned by this reality that it shattered their entire perception of her. Their disbelief, desperation, and, most disturbingly, their overwhelming concern about how this would tarnish the family's image if others found out, left me in shock. They seemed to hope I had some kind of explanation as they recounted everything. Elena had always appeared responsible and well-grounded, so it was jarring to learn that she, of all people, had succumbed to something as destructive as heroin. Then, my father turned to me with a suspicious tone and asked, "You didn't introduce her to drugs back then, did you?" The accusation floored me. Not only was it utterly ridiculous, but it was disgusting to think they might believe I had anything to do with Elena's downfall, let alone something as serious as leading her into addiction. How could I have possibly been responsible? I never even used drugs myself. Besides, I hadn't spoken to Elena or the rest of my family in years due to their mistreatment of me. Removed from their lives, I had worked hard to build my own future, far away from their toxicity. Yet, now that their pristine image of Elena was crumbling, they were desperate to place the blame on someone else, and I was the easiest scapegoat. I urged them to talk to Elena before making baseless accusations and told them outright that it was absurd to suspect me. Throughout the conversation, I couldn't help but notice that my parents seemed more preoccupied with the shame this would bring upon the family, rather than genuinely worrying about Elena's well-being. My mother, in particular, was fixated on the secret life of her once perfect daughter. She kept lamenting how shocking it was to discover this hidden side of her, and fretted about how others would react if they ever found out. Both my parents were overwhelmed and completely unprepared to handle the situation. My mother, nearly frantic, pleaded with me to come home and help them take care of Elena. "I don't even know what to do. I feel so ashamed of her. Maybe you could talk to her for us?" she begged, as if this was a reasonable request after years of silence. "I can't help Elena. She needs professional intervention," I said bluntly. I made it clear that if they truly cared about her recovery, the most effective and compassionate choice would be to admit her into a treatment facility where experts could provide the support she needed. But my father immediately rejected the idea, visibly recoiling at the thought of their family name being tainted by a public admission of her condition. He was obsessed with the potential fallout, fearing that sending her to rehab would permanently stain their reputation. The mere thought of people discovering that their accomplished daughter was struggling with something as severe as heroin addiction horrified him. He lashed out at me for even suggesting such a course of action, as if acknowledging her problem would be more disgraceful than the addiction itself. Instead, he insisted that I return home so the three of us could monitor Elena ourselves, keeping her under strict watch, to prevent a relapse. He kept repeating how much they wanted Elena to recover and return to normal as soon as possible. But to them, normal simply meant maintaining appearances, ensuring that no one else found out. They expected me to play along in this charade, pretending everything was fine while concealing the harsh reality. As I listened, my frustration and disbelief grew. Why were my parents so fixated on public perception rather than on actually helping their daughter? This was their chance to prove they could put their child's well-being before their reputation. Yet they continued to prioritize their image over her life. Despite all of this, they were now trying to pull me back in, urging me to help them preserve their illusion of a perfect family by taking responsibility for the sister they had always compared me to. I told them I needed time to think. I can't just drop everything. I have work, I have classes. But my parents insisted that I take at least 2 or 3 weeks off to assist them, claiming they truly needed my help. And now, I feel torn. A part of me wants to see what I can do for Elena, to make sure she's okay. But another part of me is tempted to step back and let my parents deal with their golden child on their own. After all, I'm not sure how much help I could really be when they seem more intent on saving face than addressing the root of the problem. Even now, I question whether I should go back at all, or if I should let them handle the consequences of their choices. Update 1. I never expected this story to gain so much attention. I'm still trying to sift through the hundreds of responses. I also want to clear something up. I don't hate Elena. I want to support her and genuinely care about her. However, since I have not communicated with my family in 3 years, I have experienced a sense of tranquility and steadiness that I lacked before. I worry that reconnecting with Elena might open the door for my parents to re-enter my life as well. Honestly, I am uncertain. If you're wondering, Elena may have been battling heroin dependency for years, possibly even before our parents became aware of it. She was undeniably the golden child, consistently praised and upheld as the ideal daughter, often under immense pressure to maintain that status. Being placed on such a pedestal diminished any room for vulnerability or mistakes. Any misstep, no matter how minor, could have felt catastrophic if Elena believed her value was solely tied to her achievements and the approval of others. Over time, substances may have become an escape, a way to cope with the crushing expectations or the fear of letting our parents down. The thought that my sister might have been suffering in silence all along, without my knowledge, fills me with sorrow. She should have felt safe enough to confide in me before things escalated to this point. I would have wanted to be there for her, to help her navigate through it. It just leaves me feeling helpless. If only I had known about this crucial aspect of her life, perhaps I could have made a difference. Our parents, being high achievers themselves, had towering expectations for both me and Elena from an early age. Personally, I need time to process everything. I will keep you updated if anything changes. Update 2. After deep introspection and encouragement from some of the comments I read, I decided to reach out to Elena. No matter what, she is my sister, and I felt it was essential to hear from her directly rather than basing my decisions on my parents' version of events. I sent her a brief message asking if she was open to talking. She responded several hours later, but only agreed to a phone call. When I finally spoke with her, the voice on the other end of the line felt like a distant echo of the sister I once knew. Her tone was subdued, softer, and more hesitant. Gradually, she revealed her struggles. Elena admitted that she had been battling addiction for several years. It began shortly after college when she started working at her law firm. She pushed herself relentlessly, striving to outwork her colleagues in hopes of gaining recognition or a promotion. Over time, she felt completely drained. Having been the perfect, exceptionally gifted daughter for so long, she believed she couldn't afford to slow down, seek help, or show any sign of struggle. She had to uphold the expectations everyone had for her. When the stress became overwhelming, a friend suggested recreational drugs as a way to relax. Before she knew it, occasional use had spiraled into dependency. Elena confessed that she had felt trapped for years. She couldn't turn to our parents because she already knew how they would react. Their obsession with appearances and their refusal to acknowledge anything that disrupted their carefully curated image made her feel isolated. So, she maintained the illusion, pretending everything was fine, even as she was losing control. Eventually, the facade crumbled. She lost her job, exhausted her savings, and hit rock bottom. As she spoke, she wondered if I was judging her as harshly as she judged herself. She expressed shame for even sharing this with me. My heart broke hearing her story. I had never realized that the pedestal our parents placed her on was, in reality, a cage. While she carried the suffocating weight of being their prized child, I bore the pain of being overlooked. Their controlling nature and favoritism had scarred us both, just in different ways. Judgment was the last thing on my mind. Instead, I expressed my sorrow that she hadn't felt she could turn to me sooner. My only regret is that I wasn't there for her. Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so, and hit the notification bell to stay updated with more shocking real-life stories happening around you.